So first of all, let me actually introduce our first speaker of this session, and he's Paul Stephen. He is CEO of Sagittarius Agency, and he's going to be talking to you about online marketing in tough times. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Well, hello, everybody. Hopefully, I've met a few of you before. Good to meet you again. I should be here in this room that's behind me, but instead I'm at home like the rest of us. But I would normally be wandering around, and I'd have probably played some sort of loud music or something by now. So unfortunately, I can't do that. So you just get me sitting at home in your desk. But I've tried to add lots of bar charts and visuals and stuff to my deck so that it maybe brings it to life. So without further ado, I'm going to bring that up now. Now, obviously, when Paul asked me to do this presentation, okay, let me share my screen. Give me a second. All right, you've got a nice big green screen in front of you at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, that's fine. That's lovely, Paul.
Brilliant. Okay, that's the first step. Yeah, so when Paul asked me to do this a couple of months ago, I was like, yeah, that'd be good. It'd be great. I can do a bit of a retrospective and there'll be loads of good news stories and everything because we'll be coming out of COVID by then. But how wrong could I have been? So I'm here to talk about marketing in through tough times. Well, so where do I start, really? I mean, the trouble is when you talk about marketing normally, you're usually focusing on the 4 Ps: product, price, place, and promotion. And at the moment, product, well, in this world at the moment, what have you actually got you can sell at the moment? Price, well, who knows what it's going to cost to even buy it to sell it on again or deliver it. In terms of your place, where your routes to market, they're all completely disrupted and everything at the moment. And promotion, as in what you're messaging, what are you going to say and how you're going to say it. I mean, it's just so many unknowns around all of those things. So it's a bit of a tough ask, I have to say, but I'm going to do my best over the next 20 odd minutes to tell you where we are. Now, just to dwell on Sagittarius, we're a digital agency, and actually, as much as we do lots of work in travel, we also work in some other sectors. Some of the brands we work with I've kind of put in here. And what I can tell you in some of these other sectors is they are coming, and when they're coming back and they're coming back strong. Because there is pent-up demand. So I believe, obviously, there will be a comeback and people will come back strong, but just don't ask me which week that's going to start. But I will tell you, you know, as much as those are different and some of them are starting to come back sooner, it has been equally dynamic and uncertain for some of those. So let's just set the scene. Some of the other previous speakers have done the same, so I won't talk about it too much. But obviously, this is not a particularly great situation, and it all started here well, it didn't really start on March the 23rd, but I took this photo of Boris when he did his official sort of lockdown moment. I recognised even then when I was sitting there thinking, wow, this is a sort of seminal moment, and I should record this for posterity. But it's the moment when the world really properly changed for us, even though we'd all been feeling it for a week or two. And I just thought I'd paint I needed to paint a picture of where we are so we can understand it from a marketing context. And bear in mind, I've tried to use, things are changing so much all the time. I've tried to use as much up-to-date stats and information as I can, and hopefully I've got them right and hopefully they're useful. So the first thing to say is I firstly looked at the data that we have. So obviously working with various travel brands, we work with tour operators, hotel groups and airlines. I can tell you in terms of traffic to websites over the last few months, well, I've done Jan to June here, their traffic is traffic to websites is down 60%, and more importantly, the sort of amount of transactions is down 60%. So this is running from the beginning of the year. If you imagine there was actually some better stats for the beginning of the year, actually probably the last couple of months are even worse than this. And in terms of where we are right now, these were stats published this week by Eurocontrol Network, and this is showing that I think the worst day there was on 12th of April. They've highlighted there where actually we're down to 93% of the amount of flight traffic going through Europe. But on the bright side, it's now up to 78%. Well, it was on the 15th anyway, 2 days ago. So things are starting to change and starting to change quickly, actually. And some of that I'll talk about in a moment. Obviously, we're in a context really where actually, certainly for the first period, as everything's shut down, this has been a bad experience, not only for the industry, but also for customers too. They've both really had to feel the pain. And we've got companies that have gone bust, but even if they haven't gone bust, then they can't afford to pay them back. So we've got this new concept of refund vouchers, which gives them a legal standpoint. But even then, they'd have to sort of effectively take you to court to force you to pay that money and all those sorts of things. But I'm not going to dwell on those. But that is where we are, and what it means is that actually there's been a massive loss of kind of trust. And when we look at the sort of where a consumer is right now, which is from a marketing point of view, what you need to be worrying about is the feelings are very negative. And so Katie, who I think presented with you guys at the last real forum back at the Holiday Inn, she did me some research for the last recent times, and you can see the sentiment in the conversation in social is really negative, and it's not just negative, it's actually kind of angry. So the biggest sort of uplift there is 39% in anger in terms of sentiment that's in those conversations. So that's something we really have to care about. But we still have the issue that from a marketing point of view, we don't know where we're going from here. FCO advice yesterday was still advising against anything but essential international travel, and no real sort of date of when that's going to change for any of us, as much as things are sort of opening, borders are opening up, I think they keep calling it, across Europe. I think unless you're a German wanting to travel to Ibiza, I think it's going to be a few weeks or months maybe for the rest of us that we can open up and go on a holiday. So, and in terms of how quick it's going to bounce back, I don't have a crystal ball either, as per the other speakers. But one stat I saw this was last week. I think this was a stat, some figures forecast by McKinsey's, and they were saying, okay, so this year is anywhere between 51% and 67% down on flights. But they were optimistically saying next year might only be 6% down, but then equally if everything goes well, it might be 50% down, 52% down in fact. So the speed of recovery is very much an unknown thing for all of us, and unfortunately I'd love to be able to sort of create more clarity for you, but unfortunately I can't. But what I can tell you is in the last 2 weeks even, as much as traffic to the websites we're seeing is not really changing, it's only up at a very small amount. People are spending more time on the site and they are spending money. The e-commerce conversion rate is up dramatically from a very low level, but proportionally up a very low. So things are changing, and they're changing fast. The other sort of signals we can see as well, if we look at some of what the big boys are doing. So this is a kind of stats I can get around the sort of money that the big guys are spending on paid search. And as we can see, they're pretty much all turned everything off in May, and now they're starting to turn it on again. So those guys are starting to invest too. So obviously, lastminute.com and OTA and booking.com is obviously got a mixture of hotels, and it's got domestic and international. So they're different businesses, but just the tide is turning. We're maybe over our hump, as it may be. So what can I tell you could be doing at the moment? So I thought, well, how's the best way to break this down? So I thought there are opportunities out there. There's things you should be doing. These are the things we're doing and working on with our clients. And ultimately, lots of people are sitting on their hands and doing nothing. So if you do these things, really, you might be putting yourself ahead of that competition. So I'm going to just go through 5 key areas, which I think you should be focusing on in order to keep you ahead of the competition. Now, the first one really is about data. Now, there are lots of people in travel looking at spreadsheets and to tell them how bad their year-on-year sales are and that sort of thing. But really, in order to sort of turn some of those red numbers into green, you really need to be looking at your market right now. So I've previously talked at a previous TTI events about the use of big data and using that to understand what your audience wants. So I cited Metallica even using Spotify playlists so they could see, well, what are people, when they're going to do a gig in Berlin, what do they like the most? We'll make sure they're on our set list. And we've got fashion brands using social media to understand what people want, and Amazon sort of actually even opening up stores based on what people are buying online and then putting that into retail space. So you should be doing the same, as I think John mentioned earlier, using and looking at social media and going to your audience and understanding what their problem is or what they're talking about is what you should definitely be doing right now. Again, Katie gave me some stats, and obviously if I look at this, we looked at the conversations, only probably only 4 weeks ago, it was very much still focused on refunds and cancellations and all that sort of bad stuff. But this is just in the last few weeks that conversation is starting to turn. People looking forward to that summer holiday and travel and stuff like that. So that the tide again is then turning, and so the positivity is starting to sort of build momentum. Equally, if you start to look at stats on Google, and it's really easy, I'd encourage you to do this. It's a great place to play. You can spend hours on it. If you like, you go to trends.google.com and put in the kind of phrases that you think are relevant or are kind of relevant to what you do. It'll just tell you what the phrases are and how they're what phrases maybe similar to what you put in are, and you can click on that and it'll tell you more similar phrases to that. And I just did a quick one yesterday on travel, and these were the top 15 conversations around travel that are happening right now. And so you can see that the sort of sentiment and what people are wanting to know answers have the answers to. So, and it's interesting, and amongst all of those, the Etihad one at the top, they've obviously got something going on there, and something like Travel Zoo being in the list is something that sparked my interest, and I'll talk a little bit about that earlier. But I thought an encouraging one was our travel agents open. I thought that was a very, very interesting one for the industry anyway. So using data to understand what's going on at the moment is really, really essential. You don't need expensive tools. You don't need to spend lots of money, but you can really learn a lot if you choose to listen and look out there. The next thing is really thinking about, well, what is your proposition? So, you know, you need to understand what your customer wants, but, you know, what is it about you? What is it that they should still love about you? Why should they stay loyal? Why should they want to use you? Why should you be their trusted friend? So some examples here of just people who I think are doing it well. Small luxury hotels really doing a great job here of actually sort of obviously offering a benefit if you're a member. It's talking about SLH for heroes. It's got travel advice, because it knows that's really important. It's obviously pumped Grecian getaways up the list, because obviously Greece is the one that's been getting done a lot of PRs opening up the soonest. Equally, Reincarnation and Kontiki there, both clients of ours, really just creating stories that still resonate with their customers. Obviously they can't sell them a holiday, but they still need to be talking to their audience. So you need to understand your audience, what they want to talk about, and how you're going to get it to them. So another thing is really thinking about, well, okay, I don't want to spend loads of money on advertising, but you don't really need to. As per the survey we did last year with Travolution, when you actually look at where people got the most sort of traction, it was in Facebook advertising. And actually social media and going to your audience is a really focused way of just getting to the people who are your niche, really. The other thing that we can see as well is that if we look at conversations around holiday, when you start to drill a little bit closer, the other sort of keywords that are in there are really fascinating. So you can read these yourself. I won't read them out there, but read them all out to you, sorry. But as you can see, there's quite a lot of focus on activities and doing stuff, getting out there, and sort of weekends, for example. So those are different. That's not normally the kind of words that are there. So the question is, what are you going to do about that? And thinking about, well, how does that affect my business? Is this something that I can augment or tweak my business? Is this something that's got to change, or have I got to completely pivot? One of our clients, Trafalgar, actually launched yesterday. They've looked at what they can do from their operational point of view, and in the US have launched a bunch of new domestic trips, which they're calling near not far, to try and take obviously advantage of the operational sort of machine that they have. But obviously with international flights being not coming anytime soon, they need to do something about it. So I think the next issue, and I mentioned it earlier, the key thing for the travel industry is trust. Trust is something that has been really damaged by with all the cancellations and people not getting refunds, and people just sort of even being afraid of getting on a plane. There's a real need for brands to be able to sort of get their customers' trust. There's been over recent months been some great examples of brands being very open and transparent. We've got Arne from Marriott, really sort of, it's a really great sort of CEO speech, really talking about the problems they have, and it's really showing them being seen to do the right thing, and kind of really explaining the problem, and it's really a really great way of kind of building empathy with your customers, and you think, oh yeah, it gives you a nice feeling about Marriott. Equally, we've had examples, there's quite a few airlines at the moment doing this, trying to really talk a lot about what's going to happen, what's the return, or how are we cleaning the planes, what's the planes going to be like when you come on, all those sort of things. Really good ways of giving people reassuring them. Equally, if you've got customer stories, you're not one of those companies that have not been able to give people a refund, or you have got flexibility, then talk about it. As I said earlier, there's lots of people who are not doing this, and you can get in front of them. So if you've got good stories, believe me, there are not many good stories out there, so use them to your advantage if you can. Equally, customer stories are always important anyway. Reviews and stuff are, but equally, Trustpilot last week published these numbers saying that actually people looking at those kind of reviews and stuff is even more prevalent. I won't read out all the stats to you, but just kind of really making the point. And then Hugh from Skyscanner last week with Travolution was saying that, you know, they're keen to get going. Obviously, everybody's keen to get going, but actually, really, people are really asking lots of questions. So really understanding that and being the answer to that problem is really where a brand can do a good job. So it doesn't matter if you're telling them how you're going to make them safe by you putting meshes between seats on the plane, or barcodes that then tell you when the seat was last cleaned, or just telling them, you know, how you can flex your holiday and change the dates and stuff like that. That's the stuff that really needs to be there for people to even make that booking. So next one I thought I'd talk about is really just thinking about marketing as a long game. Really, marketing is really an overnight success, so you can't really sort of necessarily turn it off and on again. It's quite often one of those things, people cut marketing and stop marketing straight away, and they think, well, look, you know, the FD will go, oh, that's great, we're now not spending that money, and we're still, you know, things are carrying on as they were before. I've saved money, but the reality is it's a very much short-term false economy, and I can guarantee you to get momentum again and keep going and get back up to speed again will be a very expensive thing to do. And I think you need to keep investing at the moment. There's loads of ways you could be doing that. I've already talked about some of them, and it's interesting that Travelzoo actually took this was published actually on the 22nd of May about doing above the line media and doing advertising. And okay, if they've got the cash to afford it, then great. But as I said earlier, do you remember the brand Travelzoo was in that top 15 rising searches? You have to wonder if it's got anything to do with this. I won't talk about SEO, this will be a whole talk on its own, but SEO, more important than ever right now. There's loads of things you could be doing right now which are not very costly and would really help you going forward. Certainly within some of the other brands that we're working with, that we've been doing this, and actually as things have started to come back on again, the companies that obviously that were at the top of Google or have a stronger position in Google, they've overtaken the ones who've been sitting on their hands for the last few months, and therefore they're now reaping the benefits. Some of our construction clients are actually triple their turnover they've ever been, and they're not having to buy all the traffic. They're not having to spend half as much as they were on key phrases. And there are, so SEO is really important. There's loads of parts to that. I wasn't going to spend lots of time going on it today, but we can perhaps talk about that if anybody wants to. Part of SEO, really, there are things that are coming down the line that you should definitely be aware of. Either you or maybe the agency you work with should be looking at them for you. Google is definitely making changes around how it measures results and brings you to the top, not just about keywords and key phrases. It's around how good that whole experience is on the site. It's actually looking at how people are using your pages and the things that are on the pages. They've even gone, and they've been quite open about this as well. This is not usually you having to try to work out what Google wants, but Google's actually being quite open about this now. There's this Google EAT coming down the line, which is standing for expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. This is Google's real attempt to actually really properly differentiate between the real genuine thought voices of authority, and then the sort of flip side of it is what they've called, is a new acronym. It was for me this week anyway, YMYL, your money or your life content. So if you're a voice of authority and you're talking about stuff that could really affect people's happiness, health, safety, or financial stability, they're going to really come down on hard on you if you're not, you know, it's not based on fact. So I think it's their real attempt at trying to sort of deal with the fake news that can often get lots of traction and not necessarily for the right reasons. And last but not least, really, of my five is really just thinking about this. There is a time here. This is the time to take advantage of the new normal. What the new normal for you is going to be different. Is going to be different for all of you. But you know, there's so much has changed in such a short space of time. We're all having to work differently. At Sagittarius, it's different. All of our clients is different, and that's it. That's out of the bag, and not everything will go back, as some of the other speakers have said. There'll be a balance, certainly, from the home working piece, and there are things that are definitely different now, and it's affected everybody. CEO of Microsoft, Satya, sort of said, you know, for the Fortune 500 companies he's looking for, they've had to really look at everything they've had to do. I've been at these events with you guys talking about digital transformation for probably years now, really, but it's actually digital transformation is just forced on everybody. So this isn't a temporary blip, even if you've not been able to do anything now because of costs associated, etc. The amount of conversations we're having with brands about, okay, that thing we've been talking about for 2 years, we need to do it now, and that is common globally, really. There are some other interesting little further changes I thought I'd highlight. Interestingly, desktop is back at the moment compared to last year. I think because we're not all so mobile, even though mobile is only slightly down, desktop has actually come up, and interesting, tablets the one that appeared to take the hit there, but I think there's an interesting stat, and it may be one of those things that, okay, now more people are sitting at home on their desk and less mobile or whatever, they might actually use their desktop machines more than they did. So there's things like that. I think that this is changing week and day by day, but even this chart I thought was interesting. It's irrelevant of your audience. We talk about social media, and that might be just for young people, but actually when I did a presentation at TTI, do you remember those days? Those days when we had a conference in a building. Anyway, Trafalgar, Leighton from Trafalgar was sharing with us then that actually even his clientele, which is an older clientele, is 280% up of the traffic that comes to their mobile website is now from social and from email. So it just shows you how even their demographic is dramatically changing the way they use the devices and platforms, and no doubt that will have changed in the last week or two, a few months as well. And then lastly, I just thought, there's still plenty of room for disruption. I just grabbed this as the latest one, where you've got the fly now, pay later, still sort of going against the grain, and still, money being invested. I see that in a few areas, just because the things have changed and it's not a great time for everybody. There's still room for disruption. So if you really want to pivot, and there's been that great idea that you've had for a long time, I don't think now may be the time for it. But just to finish off, as I said, because there's so many unknowns at the moment, I couldn't give you any absolutes. You should definitely do this, or you should definitely do that, because actually, as any CMO, has really just got to be looking at research, understanding the data all the time. And I thought Hexa kind of summed it up quite nicely here. Now is, as much as you shouldn't be doing nothing right now. You shouldn't be just kind of going, oh well, let's see how it works out, and then when it's all clear, I'll kind of then I'll do what I'm going to do. But I think you need to be kind of making your best predictions and being really fast and adapting as quickly as possible. And then lastly, I just sort of thought I'd dwell on, this is not really meant to be a pitch, but there's so many things that you could be doing right now. We at Sagittarius try and break it down into these kind of pillars, really looking at data, then thinking what's the strategy, then thinking about all the channels and the creative. So there are various different bits that all need to be working in kind of harmony with each other to have that sort of perfect scenario. But you can't do all of them brilliantly. So again, it's kind of, well, there are things, in certain areas you need to maybe just get the basics in place to catch up, as we call it. Then there needs to be stuff that probably you need to be doing best practice, the keep up as we call it, and then there's stuff that you could be doing that's probably going to give you a foot in front of your audience, which is the kind of stay ahead. So you have to decide of which of those 5 are yours. If you're not at least catch up on all of those 5, then you really will be lagging behind. And that would be the end of my presentation. Hopefully that was a little bit informative anyway.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. Thank you for that. And we've got time for 1 or 2 questions. First of all, that was a very detailed presentation. And just to remind you that presentations from speakers will be on TTI's website at tti.org if they've given us permission, which would be wonderful.
Yeah, happy to share that. Yeah, they're all them pretty much our own stats. So
lovely.
They're all in the public domain. So, yeah.
Yep. If you've got questions, and I see one's come in, you can either use the Q&A tab or just raise your hand in the participants panel, and then you can ask live. And I don't know if you can see, Paul, there's a question here from Edson. He mentions if you click your Q&A button, you'll see it.
Oh yeah, being honest and transparent is basic, but how to balance the lack of cash and gaining consumer trust by simply refunding their bookings? I'm a bit confused about what the...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I see Edson online. You can amplify if you want, Edson. But I think what Edson's saying here is that basically being honest and transparent should be a given. That's how you should actually be on your website. I know, Paul, you'd agree about that.
Yeah.
But travel companies are lacking cash. Consumers want refunds for their bookings, which you might not be able to give them. So how do you reconcile those 2 aspects? Hopefully, Edson, I've got that right.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think you're right. So that is a challenge. That is a challenge. I mean, I was only highlighting, obviously, where you're not that case. Then obviously you could take advantage of that. Really, that you're the one who you have been able to keep your customers happier than maybe some others haven't. I mean, there is. And I think the Marriott one was doing this, not doing the same exactly, but the CEO was almost trying to be, rather than stonewall clients or whatever, so we can't give you a refund or whatever, is they're almost trying to be empathetic and say, look, we're in a real problem. This has happened to us. We love you. We want to look after you. You've got to bear with us and all those sorts of things. I think that's that empathy and transparency is how you kind of get those on, how potentially you can get people on side. Because like you say, if you just haven't got the cash, you can't just give it to them if you haven't got it. I kind of get that. I get that.
Okay, fine. And you'll see the next.
Yeah, I can see some other.
Gabrielle.
So display advertising is no longer useful. No, I wasn't saying that at all. Actually, I'm saying at the moment it'd be very difficult. Well, quite a difficult maths equation to say you should spend money on advertising when you can't actually sell them the product, because then you're throwing money at something that you can't get an immediate return on investment. However, there is an argument for gaining some of that if you can afford to do it. And what we're seeing is that actually a lot of people have pulled out of that, even the booking.coms and those sorts of things. So actually in May, if you wanted a bid for phrases like hotels, you could have got onto page 1. It might have cost you quite a lot of money, but previously you would have even got on there because of the big guys would be bidding for it. That's maybe not the best example, but what we're seeing is that because of this disruption, some brands not having the budget that they had or pulling budgets or whatever, there are opportunities and gaps that didn't exist before. So yes, there is absolutely a place for display advertising. I'd probably be putting it into more sort of social media advertising, so it's really, really targeted rather than a more broader stuff. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Okay, and I do know, Paul, from other presentations I've seen at events, social media advertising or social media expenditure gives you a very good return. But
yeah, if you know your niche, if you are a niche product, or if you're a very broad product, that becomes more difficult. But even within that, you might have, even if your range of product is quite range, your age range might be, or your demographic, or even the geography that you operate might be something you can refine it with in social media.
Okay, and of course, if you look at the next question, which says, what would be your top advice for B2B companies when it comes to promotional marketing? A lot of the travel industry, if you look through the I suppose, the supply chain, a lot of travel companies are in the B2B business where maybe social media is not relevant. So what would be your advice for promotional marketing for B2B companies?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so this is a sort of corporate travel, that kind of stuff we're talking about, really, rather than into B2B.
Well, I mean, sorry, Paul, it might also be wholesaler. So it might
Yeah, yeah, that's
be
what
a
that was my initial
destination marketing
interpretation.
company selling hotels to a tour operator.
Yeah, I think there's still in both those instances anyway, and I don't think there's a lot of parallels in terms of trust and security and reliability. It doesn't matter if you're a corporate buying flights, you want certainty about what you can and can't buy, and how's it, if this is a PA buying it for their boss to fly to so and so, they need to know all that sort of the same level of detail. They've got the same unknowns that a normal consumer has got. Equally, into sort of B2B and distribution relationships, they're all very fragmented, and people want to know that, okay, even if that API is still working, can I trust it? Is that booking sound if I've made it? So I still think there's a lot of communication to be done to restore trust and faith, probably in the relationship you've had for years, that it's still there. And what will be just as a consumer might want to know, well, am I going to get a refund? How am I going to be able to flex that? I dare say in B2B, that is absolutely no different at all. So the communication piece is really what, if there's a theme to everything I said, it's transparency and communicating and clarity that people really want right now. At the moment, trying to inspire them to go somewhere like you would normally in travel marketing is not really the issue that people have. They're all desperate to go there.
Okay, fine, thanks. Your session is just coming to an end, Paul, but let me just touch on something else you said, because you mentioned Google Eat,
Yeah.
expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And I guess you're not, I don't want to ask you to talk about it now, but presumably there's a lot of stuff online that if we actually Google Eat, we can actually learn what that means, what we must do about it.
Yeah, I sort of deliberately put up screens of all the articles that are existing on it, like I say, and I think the Google E one was actually stuff I just copied from Google's pages, not from some sort of press or whatever. It's definitely coming. I think, like I say, it's Google putting a line in the sand as, right, okay, we're going to be responsible and we're going to hold people to an account, and we're not going to allow people to sort of proliferate with fake news that's kind of bad for people's health or financial or whatever. So I think that's why it's being transparent. But yeah, as you say, I'm not the SEO expert really, but it's stuff you need to be aware of, and it's stuff that really might not require you to do much or spend a lot of money to make sure you're doing it, but it's stuff there that can keep you ahead of the competition anyway.
So we should learn about that. And thanks for your virtual background, Paul, because for those who haven't been there, that is the holiday in London, Kensington, that we normally would be having our do's at. So, Paul, thank you very much indeed.
Close as I could get.
Lovely.